Hello everyone, welcome to the second session of Android Study Jams. I am Riddhi Gupta, an inner core member at DSC VIT. DSC VIT is an amazing group of developers, designers, and managers who come together under one roof to create a community which inspires others. So today we are back with our second session of Android Study Jams, and we will help you make some very interesting apps today to kickstart your journey as an Android developer. Let's try to make this session as interactive as possible. So do send your favorite emojis in the chats if you're excited. Yeah, I see many hellos in the chats. So with this, before going ahead, we had some interesting chats in the last session, and we do have some shout outs to make. So according to the last session, these are the people who were the most active in the last time. So we have Sai Teja Reddy Tileti, Sai Tarun Palakwa, and Akshata Bhatta. You people will be getting these amazing badges for being super active in the chats. So we even encourage you people to get super active in the chats today as well. So you can get even more such amazing badges and swags. So yes, now with this excitement going on, let me introduce you to our facilitators for today. We have Ritik Jain as our facilitator. We have Amog Lele joining us as well. So both of them are Android developers at DSC VIT, and they have a lot of experience with developing apps in Android using Kotlin. So I'm sure that our audience is super excited. Would you people like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello guys. I think you might remember me from the last session. I'm Ritik Jain, and I'm super excited to share my knowledge with you and build great apps today.
Hi everyone, I'm Amog and I'm a fourth year, so I'll be soon passing out. But DSC has been my home for like 3 years now, and it's been an amazing ride. I'm currently working as an Android developer at Navana Tech, so I have a bit of industry experience. So if you have any questions about Android in general, how I work, or maybe VIT itself, you can ask in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah, that's totally exciting. And I'm pretty sure that our audience will have an amazing time with both of you guys today. So, with that, let's get our session started. Ritik, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Riddhi, for the wonderful introduction. And you can share my slides. Yeah. So, guys, this is the session number 2 of Android Study Jams. And today is going to be full of action, really fast paced, and we'll be building two different apps in today's session. In today's session, we'll be covering the first unit's fourth pathway and the second unit's first pathway. So, what is the plan for today? What are we going to learn? We are going to learn how to use a button in our Android app and integrate it with Kotlin's logic. Then you're going to be making an app which will make you learn how to use complex layouts and will make you familiar with them, right? So that will be a pretty interesting experience for you. You'll also be dealing with some app rotations, like so that like the UI changes a lot, right? When your device is rotated, and there have to be like some changes taking place when your app rotates. So you'll be learning how to do that, and you'll also be learning how to change the app's icon. Till now, you have been stuck with that boring Android icon, but I mean, maybe boring, maybe not. I like it, but I mean, you can't always look at the same icon again and again, right? You might want to have your own icon. So you'll be learning how to do that. You'll learn how to change the app icon. Now, let's quickly go over today's schedule. First, we'll be starting with building a dice roller app. This app will help you get started with the basics. I mean, I wouldn't call them basics anymore. Now you'll be able to use a button in your app and make a app which simulates the functioning of a dice. That will be pretty cool. Then we'll take a small little break for 10 minutes in which you can just catch up with me and make the app on your own. and also like ask me any doubts if you have any, or if your app is crashing, or I mean any doubts generally, right? So you can utilize that time for that. And next, after the break, we'll be moving to building a tip calculator app. And this app will be made by Amog and explained by him. So stay tuned for that. That is going to be a really good experience for you because, as you already figured out, he's a really, what do you say, a very experienced Android developer. So he's going to share his own insights into it, and it's going to be really exciting. And finally, we are going to have a small question and answer session, because so you can clear your doubts if you had any during this session. What will we be building today? So we are going to be building a dice roller app, as I mentioned before, and it is going to look something like this. There's going to be a roll button which you click will show a different dice image every single time, so that you can simulate your dice. Then second, we'll be building this app. I mean, there is a lot of things going on in this app, and you're going to learn a lot by building this. So there'll be different components being used here, views used here. So it's going to be a great learning experience for you. So buckle up, get a bottle of water, and get ready to learn Android with us today. Before starting, I just want to tell something that towards the end of this session, we have some exciting news slash announcements coming up for you. So stay tuned for that and wait till the end to hear about our announcements. And now let's get started with building the dice roller app. Okay, so uh, in a dice rolling app, what do we need majorly? We need a way to generate random numbers, right? Because a conventional dice has like numbers from 1 to 6. So we need a way to generate any one of the number randomly. To do that, we must first understand how generating random numbers in Kotlin works, right? So before diving into the Android code directly, let's first head over to our beloved Kotlin playground and learn how to generate random numbers using Kotlin. Are you guys ready to learn today? Drop a fire emoji or something in the chat so that I know you guys are excited to learn. And uh, let's see. Also, I'm constantly looking for your comments on the left side. I have a separate display for looking at it. So, yep. Meanwhile, I'll head over to Kotlin Playground. Yep. People are excited. Okay. So now time for us to figure out how to generate random numbers in Kotlin. And I would really suggest all of you to code along with me. So open up your Kotlin playground and we'll figure all of this out on our own together. So in Kotlin, we must have a main function, right, for anything to get executed. Let's go ahead and define our main function first. There you go. We have our main function. And now we need a random number between 1 and 6. The way we do that is let's define a variable first in which we are going to store that number and call it random and equate it to 1 to 6 dot random. And now you might be wondering what I did here. What I did is that this syntax is telling Kotlin that generate a iterator from 1 to 6 and pick a random number from 1 to 6, right? So it's going to have all these numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it is going to pick a random number and assign it to this variable called random, right? Now let's just print this number and see if it's working or not. Can't type today. Let's run this. We got 5. We got 5 again. Not so random. We got 3. That is random. We got 6. We got 4. We got 6 again. And now I guess you get the point, right? So we are getting random numbers. We are able to generate random numbers, and our Kotlin function is working. Now you may be wondering, how can we abstract this? So what if we wanted to have like not a conventional dice anymore? What if we wanted something like which has 24 sides, so that you roll the dice and you get any number which is randomly generated between 1 and 24. So I think uh, classes will be an easy way to apply the abstraction. So let's go ahead and declare a class called dice. And in the constructor of the dice class, we'll go ahead and take a number which will represent the number of sides. So val num sides. It will be of the type int, and let's create a function inside the class called roll, which will return an integer. And inside this function, what we can do is return 1 to number of sides dot random. So this was pretty simple, and this basically abstracts our whole dice thing so that we can generate a random number from any between any like 1 to any number of sides. Let's go ahead and try it out. To try it out, we'll need to create a class of this, object of this class. Let's call it dice 12 equal to dice, and let's pass 12 because I want a dice which should have 6 sides to it. So I've just passed in 12 here. Now we can store the random again in a variable. So dice 12 dot roll. So this random will contain a random number from 1 to 12. And to see if it's working or not, let's just go ahead and print it out. Let's run it. We get 4, we have 9, we have 11, and finally 4. So yeah, we have a random behavior and looks like it's working properly. So I hope like this concept was clear of generating random numbers, because this is what a dice rolling app will be based on. And this was pretty simple. I mean, if you attended the last session, you'd be able to understand most of it. And someone asked in the chat also, is random library uh, a library, or you have to import, or is it inbuilt? Yeah, so this is a inbuilt function in Kotlin. You do not need to import anything. You can directly just call random, right? So yeah, now this part is clear. Let's move on to the exciting part, which is of building the dice rolling app. For that, I will now fire up my Android Studio, and you should do the same along with me. Android Studio is starting. Now, let's create a new Android Studio project. It asks us which project template do we want to start with. For our app, we'll choose the empty activity, as we just want the basic boiler code and nothing more. And let's give this application the name of Ice Roller. You can name it something much more interesting, but since I can't come up with any names, I'll just call it Dice Roller. Save location, just save it wherever you want to, whichever is convenient for you. Language, Kotlin. I'll keep the minimum SDK at Android 4.4, as it has all the features which will need to run this app, and it's pretty on the lower side of the Android API. So just, I mean, you can keep it higher also, but we do not need the additional functionality. For this, I'll just keep it at Android 4.4 and click on finish. Now let the project load. Give it some time to load. It does take quite a bit of time in the start. Let's wait a little more. It's building. Also, like try to code along with me as I won't be going super fast. You can manage to code along with me, and that'll be good for you as you'll get to learn like the most, and you can just ask your doubts if any at the same time, right? Okay, so now our project is up and ready to get started. Um, let's head over to our main activity. And from the previous, like if you would have ever built a new Android app, you would remember that you get this hello world text view, right? For this, we do not need this right now. So just select it and click on delete. Now the first thing we are going to learn today is how to use buttons. So to use a button, we need a button first, right, in the view. Let's just go ahead and select the button from the palette and drag and drop it onto the layout editor. Now we have a button inside a layout, but there is one problem, and it is that this button does not have any constraints related to it right now. To add constraints, we can just again use uh, the layout editor to add the constraints. We'll add constraints on all the four sides of the parent so that it will be uniformly centered. Now we have a button. So let's just run this app and see what happens. Let's run it. I have connected my physical device to my laptop, but you can also do the same on your emulator. It is running. Gradle build running. Let's give it some time. Always the first build does take comparatively longer than the consecutive builds. So you just have to be patient for this once. It's installing on my device. Yep, there you go. We have a button now. Now I have one question for you. What do you think will happen when we click on this button? Let me know in the chats. I'll wait for your answers. Yeah, nothing. Exactly. Nothing is going to happen because we have not set up, we haven't told the button what to do, and we haven't written any logic for it. So basically, nothing is going to happen. Let's just verify it. Let's click on it, and yeah, nothing happens. It gives us the default animation of Android of the button click, but nothing happens. So now the question is, how do we make something happen? Because that is why we would need a button, right? uh, so let's make this button functional. Let's tap on the button so that we can access all the attributes of the button. Now this button is just weirdly called button. I mean, in an app you wouldn't just leave a button saying button. That's pretty weird. So we'll change the text of this button. To do that, we'll go under attributes, and we'll go under common attributes and select this text. We can change it to something else. In this case, I'll change it to roll because it's a dice roller app, and we want the dice to roll when we click on this button. So now this button says roll. Now we need to do one more thing, one last thing. That is that now we have this button on the layout editor and we can see it in front of us. But how are you going to access this button from your Kotlin file? How do you know that this button exists? How does your app know that this button exists? It must have some ID, right? An ID which it can access this button by. So to declare that ID, or in this case, modify it, we have to come under attributes on the right hand side. and change this field called ID. In our case, let's call this let's rename it to role underscore button. And also one suggestion, just follow this convention while naming ID of snake case. So I mean that's a convention for naming anything in XML, and always have like the name of your ID followed by the view type. So in this case, it's a button. So I've named it role underscore button. So that was it for our UI side. Now to make this button functional, we will have to dive into our Kotlin code. Now you could see that my main activity.kt was open right here on the this thing on the what do you even say call this? I guess the navigation tab. But for in case if it wasn't open for you, you can look under the navigation panel on the left and go under app, under Java, under your package name, and you'll find the main activity right there. You can double tap on it and that will open it up for you. So as like once you open the main activity, you will find something such as class main activity, and it's inheriting from app compat activity. uh, don't exactly worry about this right now, don't get scared by it. Just understand that an activity is where everything takes place in an Android app, and it's something which covers your entire screen up on your phone. So everything happens under an activity, right? Now, what is this override fun on create? In simple terms and not so accurate terms, I'll tell you what I mean by that. You can just understand this as the place where your code gets executed in your Android app. So you know how we had like the fun main in like when we were using Playground, or when we were compiling Kotlin code generally, we used to use fun main, and anything inside fun main used to get executed. But here in this case, we have this on create method, and anything inside this will happen once your app is launched on your phone, right? So there is a life cycle attached to your app. You can search more about it on Google. Just search Android life cycle and you'll find like many results. Just read through them, it's quite interesting, and you might be able to understand this a little better. Now to get started, we do not mess with this already existing code. We just skip over it. We just go to the next line. And now we need a reference to a button which we created, right? The way we can do that is we'll create a variable. I'll call it role button. It will be of the type button, and we'll equate it to find view by ID r.id dot role button. Now, what did this statement do? Um, as you can just read it in English, it says find view by ID. Now, what does that mean? Like, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It is going to find the view with the given ID. Whatever ID you provide inside this function, it is going to find that view, and we are assigning that view to this variable called role button, right? So, and this was the use of the ID which we assigned before. This was to get access to the button itself. So I hope it's clear till now. And this role button variable now consists of the reference to our button in the layout. Pretty interesting, isn't it? Now we have this button. How do we tell it what to do? So now if we had to tell what to do, we can set a on-click listener. What that I'll just go ahead and code that out, and then I'll explain what that does. You can also see that I'm using autocomplete a lot, and you can do that too. Honestly, like programmers are not supposed to remember everything. I mean, you're supposed to remember, but you can't remember everything. So make use of your autocomplete like to the max. I just like if you're not familiar with autocomplete, uh, just type anything, and you can use your tab to complete it over. So roll button, and the first option it gave me was set on click listener. So I'll just go ahead and press tab, and it will open it up for me. Now, what is this function doing here? This is basically telling the button to always listen for any clicks on it. So whenever you click on the button, this thing will get executed. Anything inside this curly braces will get executed, right? Um, Now, this syntax might be looking weird to you. I mean, it's not a function. It doesn't look like a function. It looks something weird. Now, this is a lambda, and I mean, this uses the concept of lambda, and it's an anonymous function. So basically, anything you have inside these two curly braces is going to get executed. Um, okay, so now what we are going to do is on tap of this button, we are going to display a toast. Now, toast is something which shows up on your screen. It comes in a gray thing and it disappears. So, I mean, but rather than me telling you about it, I'll just go ahead and show it to you. The way you can show a toast on your screen is calling toast class toast dot make text followed by passing a context to it. You can just call this as this main activity has the context, and you can just pass it to this make text. Then you have to tell the toast what to display. So in this case, we're going to display roll button is clicked. Then how long do we want this toast to be displayed for? We're going to say toast dot length short because we do not want it to be displayed for very long. And finally, we can just call show on it to show the toast. Now let's run this app again and see what happens. Okay, our app is up, and let's go ahead and click on roll. It showed roll button is clicked. You can see this right here, right? Roll button is clicked. This is a toast. So a toast is basically used to maybe show your user something for a short amount of time, maybe some error. I mean, preferably you should use the snack bar, which you can find out more about on Google or something. So this is a simple way to display something on the screen. Just you can see it right here. It's a toast. So it looks like it's working. And so if you're following along with me till here, just type yes in the chat. Let's see how many people are actually able to follow. And also tell me if you're having fun or not. I mean, I can see people discussing a lot in the chats. Good, 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 good. People are following along. That is great. You're going to get the most out of these sessions like by following along because that's the best way. And even if it's a little fast, just try to keep up. And in the worst case, if you can't, just watch our sessions again on YouTube later on a maybe slower speed, or and again try to follow along. That's the best way you're going to learn. Okay, so now we have understood what an on-click listener does. Shouldn't we head over to the dice roller app? Yes, let's go. Let's carry ahead, let's move on to our implementing dice roller app. I'm just going to remove this toast part for now, and we can go ahead and copy this class of dice which we had previously from our Kotlin code. We'll be placing it below our main activity, and here you can see that it gives a small warning, not a warning, a suggestion. Basically it could be private, so we'll just make this property private. Now let's go ahead and create a object for this dice class. Let's call it dice, and dice is, since we wanted like 6 sides of the dice, we're just going to pass 6. And inside a roll button, uh, so like when the button is clicked, we are going to show the number which was generated. So we're going to say rand num equal to dice dot roll and random is basically going to keep track of the random number whichever was generated from our class, right? Now we're going to again use a toast to display the number. Okay, so here you might have noticed I've done random.toString. That is because a toast expects a string to be displayed, and we cannot just pass a number in this argument right here. It's a string. So that's why to convert the number to a string to be displayed, and everything else is the normal conventional thing. Let's run this app again. Okay, let's click on roll. 4, 3, 2, 6, 1. And there you go. We have random numbers being generated and displayed on our Android app. Pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, I want to play with it more. Let's click roll. Pretty cool. We are getting random numbers. Now, one thing that you might notice is that once we click on it, it just goes away. I mean, what if I wanted to look at this number again? I have no way to do that, right? I mean, my memory sucks, and probably yours does too. And so we want a way to like store this number, right? So to do that, we'll be using a text view. So we can just quickly import a text view in our layout editor. It's under palette, and drag and drop the text view onto your layout editor. Then add a constraint to the top of the parent and to the top of the button so that it's between the top of the parent and between the button. So it'll be centered between those two things. Now, as you can see, this text view is pretty small right now, and we wouldn't want something like text view being shown to the user. I mean, the exact word text view showing to the user. To change that, we remove the text from the common attributes. We just empty it. And since initially we wouldn't want the text view to display anything, we can just leave it empty. But now you might ask, how do we actually change the properties? How do we see that how big is it getting, or what color is it of? How do we play around with the properties of the text, right? That is one question you might be having. So to have a text which only renders in the layout editor, we can make use of this property called text with a this spanner icon, right? It's a sort of toolbar icon. Here we can enter a text. So let's enter something like 5. And you can see that it's being shown here. Uh, let's go ahead and make it bigger. And I'm assuming by now you should be familiar with how to deal with text views and their properties. So under all attributes, we'll just head over to text size. It is right here, and change it to 42 SP. Now it's big and clear. And we'll change the text color to black, and that is done. Uh, it looks pretty good now, right? It's pretty cool. Okay, so now we are again stuck at the same problem. How do we actually access this text view in our Kotlin code? To do that, we'll need to have an ID for it, right? So let's go ahead and assign it some ID which we can remember and which we know. Under attributes, in the property called ID, we'll call it the num text view. It stands for the number text view, and hit enter. Now we have this text view successfully placed in our layout editor, and we'll head over to our main activity again. Let's get a reference to our text view. To do that, we follow the same thing again. We get a reference val num text view. This is the variable which will store the text view. It will be of type text view and equated to find view by id r.id dot num text view. So this will get us the reference of the text view from the layout into the num text view. Cool. So now we can basically change the text from a Kotlin code. That is what we want, right? So we want that whenever this button is clicked, the text of the num text view should change. So we can just go ahead and get rid of this toast function. So the way you change text of a text view is call the variable which stores the text view dot text, and you can equate it to the text you want it to store. In this case, it'll be random to string, and that is pretty much it. I mean, let's go ahead, run it, and see if it's working or not. Moment of truth. I'm gonna click on roll. Roll 1, 5, 3, 5, 1, 4. Pretty cool, right? It's working. We are getting random numbers between 1 to 6 on clicking this roll button, and you can see it right here on the display. It's neat. And now I'll just give you like some 5 minutes, I mean 2 to 3 minutes, so that you can catch up to this part, and we'll be moving on to the next part after that. So since in the next part, I would like all of you to get some assets, which will be the images of the dice. We'll be sharing a link with you in our chat, and also we'll be showing a banner of it. So just head over to that link and download the folder. I mean, it will be a zip file which will contain all the assets which will be required for the next part of this session. You'll basically be getting the images of all the 6 dice so that you can represent all the numbers from 1 to 6. Go ahead and download those images. I'll give you guys some 3 to 4 minutes to do that. Also, I personally do not like any silence. And if you would have attended last session again, you'll know that I'm a beatboxer. So I'll just drop a beat for you guys. Once you're done with downloading all the assets, let me know in the chat done, so that I can just move on to the next part. Okay, Harsh Avinash is asking if I can do a cover on Bangarang. Okay, so like I used to do this cover, but I don't think I remember it right now. Uh, so yeah, it's better not to embarrass myself right now. I might not right now. Okay, people are finishing up downloading the assets. Let's wait another minute and we'll move on to the next part. Again, let me know, guys. Are you enjoying this session till now? Is it fine? Am I going too fast, or is it cool? Okay, I feel most of you are done with downloading the assets. So uh, now, since we need images of these dices in our app, we'll need to import all those images inside Android Studio in some way, right? To do that, we can use this resource manager, which you find on the leftmost side of your toolbar. So just head over to the leftmost side and you'll see something called as a resource manager. Click on it and the resource manager should pop up. It'll look something like this. And this place is basically used to deal with all your resources. You can find all the images of your app under drawable and color, layout, map, strings, lot of stuff, right? You can find them all right here. So under drawable, to import, we need to click on this plus button right here and select import drawables, which is the last option in the plus button. Let's click on import drawables. For me, the dice images are all located under downloads, but for you it might be different. So just head over to the path for wherever your dice images are located at and select all the 6 dice images at once. We do not want to like import one at a time. We can import all together. So just select all these 6 dice images and click on OK. This will be the next dialog you'll see. It says 6 resources ready to be imported. Everything is fine. You do not need to change anything. You can just click on next. And now you can click on import. Done. There you go. We have all the dice images inside our Android Studio project and they are ready to be used. Cool. I hope all of you follow along with this and import all the images inside your project. Now we can go ahead and start using these images. Head over to your activity main.xml so that we can modify the layout. Since we won't be requiring this, but I mean the text view anymore, we can click on it and just hit delete to get rid of our text view. Now, since we'll be placing this roll button not exactly in the center, but below the image view, for now we can just clear all the constraints of this roll button. To do that, we go under the attributes and under the constraint widget, and we can clear all the attributes. Clear, clear, clear. Now this roll button does not have any constraint to it. So let's go ahead and drag this image view from a palette and put it inside our layout editor. It pops up this pick a resource dialog. So for now, let's just select dice 6 as our default image and click on OK. You can see that this image is huge and this is not how we want our users to see the dice as, right? This is too big and it's just too big. We need to make it smaller. So to do that, click on the image view under under attributes, head over to your normal here, like in the constraint below the constraint widget, under the layout with property, just set it equal to something like 150 dp and layout height to 150 dp too. And now it looks much better. It looks the right size. So uh, let's place it somewhere here. Add a constraint to the top of the parent, add a constraint to the left, add a constraint to the right so that it is centered horizontally. Then we can add a constraint to the to the bottom of the parent so that it is centered. Or you know what? It'll look better if we just have a constraint which is on top of this button, and this button has a constraint to the bottom of the parent, and we have a constraint left and right. Give a margin of around 48 dp from the bottom as to the button, right? So this is done. Our UI is done. Now, this image view, you might notice that it has a default ID of image view. It's not good to keep the default ID. I mean, you can, but once there are more images, more views, it will get confusing. So let's go ahead and change this ID to something like dice underscore image view, or just simply, okay, dice underscore image view. That is pretty cool. We can hit enter, and now the ID of this image view has changed. So our UI of the app is done, and now we just need to set up the logic for generating random images with use of our random function. For that, let's head over to our main activity again, and you can see that there are some errors right here. That is because our text view has been deleted, so we cannot access that text view. So from here also we can just delete the text view and delete it here, delete it from here too. That is gone. Our text view is gone, and now we need access to our image view. To do that, let's call this variable dice image, and it will be of type image view, and equate it to find view by id r.id dot dice image view. So dice image variable will contain the reference to the dice image view, right? Uh, Now, this button, this button on being tapped is generating a random number between 1 to 6 and storing it in this variable random, right? This we have dealt with this particular variable multiple times now. We have it here from quite a while, so we know what this is storing. This is storing a random number between 1 to 6, and uh, to basically to basically just assign the dice image view a new image which will correspond to the number, the random number. We will need to change the asset of the image, right? So what I mean by this is we have the random number of 2, so that should have the image of the dice which is showing the number 2. And similarly, if we get a number 5, we need to have a dice image which will show the number 5. So how can we do it? In the last session, we learned how to use the when statement. So we'll be making use of that right now. So we say when, and we apply this when on this rand num variable, open the curly braces, and we say when it is 1, what do we want it to do? We want the dice image dot set image resource r dot drawable dot dice 1. Now, you might be a bit confused as to what is happening. What this is doing is it is going to check the value of this variable called random, and it is going to compare with all the cases right here. So till now we have just defined one case which says that when the value of this variable random is 1, we do this particular thing. We set the dice image dot set image resource, and we set it to the dice1 image. Now, how are we getting this image? This image is accessible through the resources which could be found from r.drawable.dice1. This represents the image which is representing the dice number 1, basically the dice which is showing the value of 1. So similarly, we'll have to do this for all the other uh, cases. And since I'm a programmer, I will copy paste. That's what most programmers do. Change the cases right here. Change it here to 3, 4, 5. And since when case is, it has to be all inclusive. That means that it has to include all the cases. The last case of 6 must be referenced with else, because there can be cases such as like when we get a number which is greater than 6, but we have the images only till 6, right? So what should we do in that case? So this will take care of that particular case. So it will just set any number which is 6 or greater than 6 to the dice image of 6. Cool. So looks like everything is sorted. I mean, this should work. Let's go ahead and run this again to check it out. Let me open up my device. Installing. There you go. We have a dice roller app, and we can already see the image of 6, which is the default image which we had set. Now, this is when we'll get to know if it's working or not. We're going to click on the roll button and let's see if it changes. It changed. We got 4, 5, 5, 3, 3, 2, 6. Looks like it's working. We have successfully finished our dice roller app. And this is a pretty cool app which you can show your friends and basically simulate working of a real physical dice. And I mean, this is a pretty amazing app for a beginner to make because it helps you deal with several concepts and it gets you familiar with writing code in Kotlin and dealing with like views in your layout inside Kotlin. It's a pretty great app to get started. Now, all of you just finish it up till this point, and then I'd like to tell you some improvements which we can make to this code so that it's a little more cleaner. Because as a developer, you always want to write really clean code so that it's presentable to the world and also to yourself. So just go ahead and finish to this point and let me know in the chat when you're done. And honestly, it's a pretty good app to just play along with. You can just use it. G1 is done. Good job, good job. That is great. Cool. So people are done. And now the last thing I'd like to show you is just okay, Harsh Avinash is almost done. Catch up soon. I mean, you'll be able to catch up. So one last thing I'll just show is like cleaning up this code. So you can see right here that we have a lot of things going on inside this on-click listener. It's not a good convention to just leave so much of code inside a single function. What we can do is we can come outside this on create a function called uh, roll func, which stands for roll function. And we can just copy everything from here. I mean, cut it and paste it right here. And it throws some error because it doesn't have access to the uh, variables which we had defined in the onCreate function. We'll just paste it right here and we'll get access to this one too. Yep. And okay, 1 second. I'll need to have the roll button there too. Cool. This function is ready, and inside the on-click listener, we can just simply call this function roll func, and it should achieve the same exact thing. This is throwing a warning because we can make this function private. So let's just make it private. Cool. Let's rerun this app and see if it works. Yep, there you go. This is working, and we have the exact same result. Now, one last modification that I like to make before finishing up this app is now you know that, I mean, you might know that in Kotlin, when statement can actually return a value, so we can store it in a variable. Now, instead of setting the image resources in all the cases, we can just get the value of the resource itself, like which resource has to be set, and store it into a variable and set it once and for all uh, to the image. So I'll code that out. I'll just explain what I mean by that. Val image resource is equal to this, and we can just remove these brackets. Let me remove all cases. Copy this. Copy more. Okay, so what this is going to do is, depending on the random number, it is going to assign the dice drawable to this variable called image resource, right? So if it's 1, it is going to assign the drawable of dice 1 to this variable called image resource. If it is 2, it's going to assign the drawable of dice 2, and so on. So now we can just set the resource on the dice image once. So we just have to do image res once, and this should function as before. Let's run this again. Running, and let's see. Still works, right? So I think we're done with the dice roller app, and this was a really exciting journey. And I hope you learned a lot throughout making this app. And we have tried to follow all the best practices. So this was it for the dice roller app. Now I would like to give you guys a little 5 minutes break before we go on to the next app, which will be taught to you by Amog. So just finish this up and refresh yourself for like 5 minutes, and then we can move on to the next part of this session, which will be taken by Amog. Also, in the next app, like, you're going to learn a lot of things, a lot of things, and that app is going to teach you a lot about layouts and how to deal with them, and it's going to be great. I hope you're really excited for the next app. So maybe before I sign off, I'll just drop a beat for all of you guys who are actually right here in the break. So this is my last beat, and since Avinash reminded me of dubstep, I'll drop a beat related to that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the second part of this session. And yes, Jeevan, we are initializing the image view again and again. That is absolutely not required, and we actually have something that will make stuff like this much easier in the current app that we're going to be building. So hang around, and we'll show you how it's done. But let's just get started with that. So I'm going to be sharing my screen now. Right, I hope everyone can see me. And let's just get started. So this is the app that we're actually going to be building today. So it's a simple tip calculator app. So first we're going to enter how much the service of whatever we were getting cost us. Then we're going to tell them if it was amazing, good, or just okay. And then if you actually want to round up the tip to a whole number, then we just calculate the tip amount. Now this is the same simple, but there's quite a lot of stuff going on over here, and it's important because you learn a lot about layouts and how actual apps in production are built, because we're going to be moving away from find view by id. So let's just get started with it. Okay. I'm going to be opening up Android Studio as usual, and you may notice that it's a yellow icon instead of a white one. That's because I'm on Android Studio Canary, which is like the latest bleeding edge version of Android Studio. um, anyway, let's create a new project. And as always, we start off with an empty activity. This is pretty much how you're going to be starting your apps always. And yeah, let's go ahead. Empty activity. Let's call it tips calculator. Right. Kotlin, and I'm going to be targeting API 21. This is the most common SDK that developers will typically target, and that's because it's it runs on 94% of devices, but it has all of the latest features that you need to keep your app um, using the latest and greatest. So it strikes a very nice balance between compatibility and features. So we are not going to be using legacy support. Android X is the way forward, and let's just finish. And as Ritik mentioned, we're going to be gradual syncing now. Just takes a while. Also, that reminds me, I really should tell you folks about what Gradle actually is. It is important for learning how Android projects are built. So when we look over here, we actually have a bunch of files. I'm not going to explain all of them. The important ones are build.gradle outside and the one inside the app. So let's just go ahead and explain what those are. So the outer one first. This is your project level build.gradle. I guess some of you might not be able to see my text, so I'm just going to be zooming in a little first. Oops. Just I think this should be better for most of you. Yeah, so the topmost comment says this is a top level build file which where you add configuration options common to all subprojects.module. Now, this tells you pretty much all you need to know. So what it does is each Android project has a top level build.gradle file which instructs Gradle how to build your project. And then you have several or just a single module inside that project. So for most apps that you're going to be building, you're just going to have one sub project or module, which is this file, the app module. That's the second build.gradle file that we're going to see. But for apps which are large, for example, something like Swiggy, Zomato, they have a lot of modules inside, which helps them actually separate the code a lot better and also speeds up build times. So let's move on to the app level build.gradle, which is a lot more interesting. Now over here, the very first block over here is a plugin block. Now plugins are something that modify the way that Gradle actually builds your project. The very first one is a com.android.application. Now this is an important plugin. It tells Gradle how to build Android projects. Um, and the second one is Kotlin Android. This is necessary if you want to use Kotlin inside your Android projects. So both these plugins are present by default inside your Gradle project. Next, let's move on to the Android block. Here, the very first thing you see is a compile SDK version. This just tells Gradle that we are going to be using SDK version 30 to be building our project. And the build tools version is also something similar, and typically it will start with the number which is the same as the compile SDK version. The others are minor uh, updates or patch sets, but in general, these build tools are what actually build your project. Mm. Next, we have the default config. Now, what exactly is a config? For that, we'll just move down to build types and then get back to what default config is. Now, we have two build types inside our any standard app. You have a release build type and a debug build type. The debug build type is implicit, so you won't need to actually specify it here, but the release thing is present. So what these build types actually do is they turn certain options on or off depending on the build type that you're going to be using. The release build type actually removes all debugging options, and it is meant for building an APK that you can actually put on the Play Store. But today we are not going to be doing that, so the release thing is not really important for us now. But getting back to default config, what this is just a configuration which is common for all build types. So for both release and debug, it is common, and it has some important options in here. So let's just go over them. The very first, application ID. This is a unique identifier for your app that you'll be using to release your app to the Play Store, and it needs to be necessarily unique. But for now, since of course we are not doing that, I'm not going to be changing this. Next, we have the min SDK version. This, as Ritik explained, it's the minimum Android version that your app will run on, and API level 21 corresponds to Android Lollipop, which or 5.0. Then your target SDK version. Your target SDK version is the highest version of Android that your app supports, and it has to be the same as compile SDK version. Otherwise, Gradle will show you warning. Next, we have version code and version name. These two are the things which are visible to you in the Play Store when you're actually when you go to the very bottom. You'll see something like 1.0.1, 1.0.2, stuff like that. So the version code needs to be increased every single time a new APK is published to the Play Store, but the version name can remain the same. And that's the major difference. Now, down to this test instrumentation runner. This is for automated testing, and it's not really important for us right now. You don't need to know it to actually build apps, but it's a valuable skill to have if you want to actually build a career as an Android developer. So I suggest you look it up if you're interested. Next, we have some compile options and Kotlin options. The compile options are basically saying that both our source code, and the target, or basically our device or phone, they are compatible with Java version 1.8. And then we have Kotlin options, and we say that we are targeting the JVM version 1.8, which is exactly the same as what we specified in the compile options here. This is just to make sure that the Kotlin compiler doesn't get confused. Now, down to the interesting part, the dependencies. Every project needs to import some external libraries once in a while, and this is where you actually add them. They are called your dependencies, and the way they work is you add you add a keyword called implementation, and then you add the library full specified path, which is typically present in the libraries README that you're trying to add. Anyway, we have some test implementation and Android test implementations. As I mentioned, these are for automated testing, which we don't really need. So let's just get rid of them. And every time you make a change in your build.gradle files, Android Studio will show you a pop-up saying that Gradle files have changed. A project sync is necessary. So you just want to go ahead and click on sync now, which will make sure your Gradle files are kept up to date while building your project. Um, and keep an eye on this particular library, material library. We're going to be using this near the end to make our UI more polished and to conform to the material design. Anyway, if you have any questions right now, just write them down in the chat and I'll do my best to answer you. Feels like you're seeing some package.json file. You're pretty close because this is the equivalent. Um, we'll be using this to specify the dependencies, just like in the package.json. If we have no more questions, I'll be moving on and we'll get started with building our app. Right, let's go ahead. Now let's move on to activity main.xml. Now, so far you guys have been building your UI using drag and drop using this visual editor, but for this session, or this part of the session, we're going to be using we're going to be editing the XML code directly. And I really think this is important for people to learn because there's a lot of things you can do much quicker inside XML directly rather than using the graphical editor. And as we change things here, you'll see things actually change in the graphical editor preview window over here. And basically your graphical editor just edits this XML by itself. And XML is pretty similar to HTML in the sense that you have an opening tag, a closing tag, and pretty much a similar syntax, including attributes. So let's just get started. Now, you might have seen that there was something present here, a text view, but which says hello world, but we don't really need that. So let's get rid of it and get started with building our project. Now, almost all projects that you build are going to have a design associated with them, whether you have it in your mind, someone created it for you, or your client gave it to you. All apps need a design. So let's go over and check out what the design is. This is the design that we're going to be following initially, and then we're going to upgrade it a bit, make it a little bit more polished. So this is our initial design. We have an input field over here which asks for the cost of service. We have a text which just shows a question, how is the service. We have some radio buttons which are mutually exclusive selectable components, like if you click on one the others will be unselected. And then we have a switch which is like a boolean, on or off, so round up tip, yes or no. And then we have a button which when we click will actually calculate the tip amount that needs to be paid. So this is the design we're going to be following, and I'm just going to be moving back and forth a little, seeing how it actually looks and then implementing the design in our code. So let's get started. The very first thing we have is an input text field. So for that, we use a component called edit text. So let's go ahead and add that now. Edit text. And now we see two attributes over here, layout width and layout height. So for width, let's just set it to 140 dp. And about height, how about making it just wrap content. So if you guys don't know what wrap content is, it basically means it will the height will be exactly the amount it needs and not a little more. So that's exactly what we want in this case. We don't want it to expand all the way or to have a hard-coded height. So that's what we need. But it looks kind of bad over here. Like it's right there in the corner. It doesn't look good at all. So maybe let's try adding some constraints to it. Now, constraints are important. Constraints tell the Android framework how to actually render your components on the screen. So you're going to have constraints like attach the top of this component to the parent component, add some amount of distance between them. All that are called constraints. So the very first constraint that we're going to be adding is this one, top to top of parent. So what this constraint is actually saying is connect the top of this edit text to the top of the parent. And the parent is this constraint layout, basically our container, our entire screen. So connect the top of our edit text to the top of our entire screen. That's what we're saying. And the next one we're going to be doing is start to start of parent. And you might have noticed that instead of using left, we are using start. And just a side note here, this is important because in some countries you have languages which are read from right to left instead of left to right. So in such countries and for such languages, Android will actually completely reverse your layout. So everything will be at the right instead of at the left. So start makes it direction agnostic. So in such languages, it will keep it to the right, and for most others, such as English, it will keep it to the left. So that's pretty good for a user experience. But again, it's still in the corner. What can we do to actually change this? That thing is called a margin. So we're going to be adding margins to our component over here. So let's go with margin top of 16 dp and a margin right, or sorry, margin start of 16 dp as well. And I think that looks good. That looks closer to what we had over here. But we still see that there's some cost of service over here. It's like giving a hint to the user as to what exactly should be entered over here. And that's exactly what Android calls it. It's called a hint. So we're going to be adding a hint attribute, Android hint, and let's just say cost of service. And now it looks exactly like our component over here. So let's move on to the next thing that we're going to be adding. Next one is a text, just a text which is not editable. But so for that, we're going to be using a component called text view. And for this, just wrap content for both of them, and add some text over here. And the text is going to be how was the service? Simple question. But again, this thing doesn't have constraints. So let's just go ahead and add them. And a quick tip, even if you're editing the XML, you don't have to do everything inside XML itself. You can use a visual editor as well. And typically what I like to do is I like to set the constraints using the visual editor and do everything else such as the margins and the attributes using XML itself. I find that is a good workflow for me. Anyway, so again, we need some margin over here. So, all right, quick question for this. Where do you think we should attach the start of this text view to? We have two options. We can attach it to parent as we've done right now, or we can attach it to this edit text. Quick question for you guys. Just answer if you think you know the answer, along with some reasoning as to why. All right, parent, can you please explain why? Guys, reasoning is important. You can't just guess. Right. Okay. So unfortunately, guys, your answers were wrong, and I'll explain why. So the better option here is to attach the start to the edit text. And the reason is, yes, you can actually do this. You can attach the start to the start of the edit text. And this is good because if you actually want to edit the margins, the start margins of this edit text, then this view will go along with it. This text view will go along with the edit text, and you don't have to edit the margins for every single one of them. So suppose I wanted to increase this to 24 dp. If I did that, both of these would now be 24 dp. If I wanted to make it 100 dp, both of them would go along. But if we did it to the parent itself, we would need to change every single one of them. So this is a good practice. You might want to chain views that you want to go together, attach constraints to each other instead of to the parent. Anyway, back to 16dp. And you might have seen this Android ID. This is important for getting references, of course, as Ritik would have explained. But I don't like the name edit text, so let's change it. Um, but changing it right here would cause us to also have to change it in these two places, and that's pretty inconvenient. So Android Studio has something really convenient if you want to edit every single occurrence of an ID, a variable name, a file name, whatever you want. So you just want to go to this, right click, refactor, and rename. Also, you can use the shortcut over here, which is Shift F6, right? Um, right, so rename, let's just call it cost edit text, right? It's generally a good idea to name um, the components after the purpose that you're going to be using them for, so that you can actually identify them easier and access them easier inside your code. So refactor, and you'll notice that this has changed in every single place that it was being used. So this is a pretty nifty little function, and that's why I like working with Android Studio. Anyway, on with the session. The next part is these three radio buttons. But we can't just put radio buttons there directly. We need to use something called a radio group. So for that, let's just add a radio group. And basically what a radio group does is just a container for our radio buttons, and we just put them inside. You can think of it like a div in HTML if you are experienced with that, but it's more specialized. It's just for radio buttons. And the reason is that you can actually get the reference to the selected radio button directly through this radio group. So it's pretty convenient to use it inside your code. Anyway, let's go ahead and add those radio buttons. So first, a radio button, wrap content, add some text, and the text is amazing and 20%. So amazing, 20%. Right, that's our radio button. So let's just copy paste and change the stuff. Next one is good, 18%. Last one is okay and 15%. Right, now that's our radio button. Let's go ahead and add constraints to this as well. Um, and just like always, I'm going to be setting top to top of. Oh, I forgot to give this an ID. So let's just call it service text. That's good. So top to top of service text, and start to start off service text. Good. But you can see that there's some overlap over here, right? That's not really. Oh wait, I forgot. They should be top to bottom off, not top to top off. Right. So top to bottom off. But again, it's very condensed. Even this text. So let's maybe add a little bit of margin on top. Margin top of 8 dp. I think that looks good. It's close to what this thing is. But if we see here that there's a default, like this one is selected by default, and that's good behavior for a radio button. You want to set one of them enabled by default. So let's just go ahead and do that. And to do that, all you have to do is go into the radio group and set check button to the ID of the radio button you need to add. And so let's just add some IDs to these radio buttons. Let's call this one amazing. Let's call this one good. And let's call this one okay. Right? And let's just set amazing as a selected by default. So if we look over here in our preview, we can see that amazing is the one which is selected. Let's move on with the session. And the next one we have over here is a switch. We need to add a switch. So let's go ahead and add that. For this, you're going to be using a switch compat component. Um, Same as always, wrap content. And if we see there is some text in front of the switch, so let's go ahead and add that as well. Um, Round up tip question. Round up tip. Yes, we would like to round up a tip indeed. Now let's go ahead and set our constraints over here. Like always, top to bottom of our radio group, which of course doesn't have an ID because I forgot to give it. Let's just call it service radio. Hmm, Service radio. Yeah, that's pretty cool. But as we saw here, this is stretched across the entire screen. And how are we actually going to do that? Fortunately, there's a way to do this using constraint layouts in Android. And what for that, we are not going to be adding just two constraints, we're going to be adding three. So the first constraint we added was, of course, the top to bottom of the radio group. The second one that we will be adding is a start to start of the parent. And the next one is end to end of parent. That managed to center it, but didn't actually stretch it across the entire screen. So for that, we actually need to change the width. As we see here, it's set to wrap content. So it will take up exactly as much as is required and not a single pixel more. So instead of that, let's just change it to 0 dp. 0 dp is a shortcut to tell your constraint layout that you want your width to be matching the constraints. So stretch it to as far as the constraints will take you. But again, it doesn't look that great. So let's just add a bit of padding. Sorry, margin. So margin start 16 dp, margin end 16 dp. I think that looks good. That looks similar. But again, if you want to set this as default, as is present in the design, we can go ahead and is checked or is selected for that. Anyway, we don't. It's not necessary to. We can do it if we really want to. Next, we have a button and a text. Those two are the last things that we'll have. We'll just go ahead and add that button. Wrap content, blah blah blah. Then some text inside the button, which is calculate. That's a nice looking button, but it's not where we want it. So let's just add the constraints again. And the top to bottom of this. That looks good. And again, let's just change the width to 0 dp so that it becomes stretched across the entire width of the constraints. And if you notice, since the constraints are connected to this, it did not stretch all the way across the screen. So it actually does just match this constraints and not the width of the entire screen. But yeah, that's it for our UI right now. If you have any questions about this, drop them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer. Right. Okay. So I guess some people want a break for a few minutes. I think we can give them that. I'll just be back in 5 minutes then. I think that sounds good. Oh, in that time, you can ask some other questions about me, where I work, how the work is, what the scene is for getting a job in Android, stuff like that. Feel free to ask me that as well. Yes, I'm working as an Android developer at Navana Tech right now, and yeah, it's pretty exciting. Anything specific about being an Android developer? Java beginner recommendations. So I'd recommend you actually use Kotlin because it's is the future for Android, if you ask me. I think the one thing I like most about the Android framework is that it doesn't constrain you to just one single style of design. You can create your own custom widgets, you can make it look whatever you want it to look like. And I think that's the greatest power of the Android framework. If you guys have no more questions, I'll get on with our project. Right. The impact of Flutter on Android developers. So, ironically, I feel that it's going to increase the demand for native developers because Flutter can't do everything. There's a lot of platform stuff that you absolutely need native for. And then, if you have Flutter developers who can do only Flutter, then you're going to need native developers who are going to help the Flutter developers do the platform stuff. They're going to be writing plugins in native and connect them to the Flutter part of the code. That's what I think. Right. Anyway, moving on. Now that we have actually completed the entire layout, let's move on to the code. But first, let's just rename the switch. Shift F6, shortcut. Let's just call it um, round up switch. Refactor, and it'll rename everything. And of course, add an ID to this button. Let's just call it calculate button. Right, now that we've added IDs, oh wait, I keep forgetting. We need to add a text here as well. A text view with some text in here, which is tip amount. And let's just put it where we need it to. In the design, it is at the bottom right corner, close to the button. So let's just do that as well. Constraint to the button, constraint to the button, and it's exactly where we want it to be. Right. But again, we don't want users to see just an empty tip amount all the time when they just open an app. That's bad user experience. I wouldn't like it in an app myself. So we can do something which will make it easier for us to actually see in the preview the tip amount, but the users won't actually see it unless we set it ourselves. So instead of Android text, let's remove the Android part of it, make it tools text. So what this does is it just shows you this in the preview, but it won't actually show the users. So let's just say $12, tip amount $12. And this is great for prototyping when you don't want things to be seen by the user directly. Moving on to the code, now we're going to be doing some behavior or app behavior. And as I mentioned, we are no longer going to be using find view by ID to get references to our code. So what we're going to be using is something called view binding. And view binding is like a feature of building Android apps, which is officially supported by Google and Android. So to enable view binding, all you need to do is go into your app level build.gradle file. Inside your Android block, this one, you need to add another block called build settings, or is it? See, anytime you don't know something, if you don't remember it off the top of your head, it's perfectly fine to go ahead and Google for it because that's exactly how a developer works. So let's just go and search for view binding, and yeah, that's it. Build features and set view binding to true. Let's go ahead and sync. And what view binding will actually do for us is instead of having to call find view by ID every single time, is going to bind a variable to this layout file. So all of these components inside here, they're all going to be accessible from that binding variable. And the way to do that is, first of all, you need to build your app once, use this little hammer icon here. And that's actually necessary for generating the view binding class. So we'll wait for this build to finish, and then we'll go ahead with the view binding. Okay. Now that our build is finished, let's declare a variable to hold a binding, latent var binding. And as you can see, it provided me autocomplete for this activity main binding. This is a class that was generated by the Android framework. And if you control click on it or command click on it, if you're on a Mac, it'll actually take you to your layout over here, which means that it's being bound to this particular layout. And to find out the name of this class which has been generated, you just need to take the name of this file. So in our case, it is activity underscore main.xml. So you convert it to camel case, you remove the underscore, you convert it to camel case, which becomes activity main in camel case. And then you just attach binding to the end of it. And that is the name of the generated class. But again, it won't do anything by itself. And if you're curious as to what latent actually does, it's a promise to the Kotlin compiler that we will initialize this variable with something before actually using it. Now, this lets us avoid having to do very bad stuff like making this nullable. Like you add a question mark and then initialize it to null, and then you have to do a lot of null safety checks like if binding not equals null and all that stuff. So just to avoid all that, what we do is we put late in it, and we're just telling Kotlin that don't worry, it will not be null. I guarantee you that because we are going to initialize it before we actually use it. So let's actually fulfill that promise. Let's say binding equals activity main binding dot inflate and pass in a layout inflator. This layout inflator is a property which is present in app compared activity. So don't be alarmed if you don't see it actually present here somewhere. All right, so now what we have actually done is we have inflated this layout. We have bound this layout um, to this variable. And instead of setting the content view, so what set content view this function call actually does is it sets the layout for this particular activity to this activity underscore main file. Now, since we aren't using the file directly, we are using this binding variable. We remove this part and then we set binding dot root. Root is the root view, like the parent reference. In this case, parent is a constraint layout, right? So this is how view binding is done, and you'll see how easy it makes so many different things. Um, right. So if you have any questions about view binding, please ask right now, and I'll answer. I appreciate how you use Edge on a Mac. Yes. What else would you use? I really don't like Safari. If there's no questions about view binding, I'll move on. Right. So now that we have bound this, we can actually access every single component over here, button, text view, radio group, through this binding variable. And the way we can do that is just do binding dot, and you can see that we have all of these available to us now. So the very first thing that we need to do is actually get a reference to um, stuff that user has input inside this cost of service edit text. So we can do that using val input amount equals binding dot cost edit text. But if you actually try to use this, this would cause an error because this is just a widget. So what we actually need to do is binding dot cost edit text dot um, text dot to string. And what it's going to do is it's going to give us a string containing everything that the user has input inside this cost of service edit text. But this still doesn't solve a problem. We don't need a string, we need numbers, because we're going to be performing some maths on it to calculate the tip, right? So we're going to be needing some numbers. More specifically, we're going to be needing floating point or doubles. So thankfully in Kotlin, there's a convenient function for that, and you can just do dot to double. Okay, now input amount is a double, and we can use it in our further calculations and whatnot. Next, now that we have this input amount, we need to figure out how the service was, or rather, what the user has selected for this radio group. So what we can do is we can do val percent equals when, and as Ritik told you, when can be used as an expression to return um, a value instead of just as a conditional switch case sort of thing. It's an expression in Kotlin. So for this, we are going to be doing binding dot radio service radio dot check radio button ID. And what this is going to do is it's going to we're going to be checking which ID is actually selected. So we have three options here. We have ID amazing, we have ID good, and okay. So let's just add those. And the way you can do that is through the R class, as I think Ritik would have explained. So R dot ID dot amazing. When it is R dot ID dot amazing, return 0.20 or 20%. When it is R dot ID dot good, return 0.18 or 18%. Else, return 15%, 0.15. And that's how we got the percent that we need to calculate the tip amount. Now, the tip amount is the input amount multiplied by the percent. And I think that gives us a pretty good approximation, but we're still forgetting something else, which is this roundup tip thing. So if this button is selected, then we need to round up the tip to the next integer. So for that, we can check using if binding dot roundup switch dot is checked, then tip amount equals Kotlin dot math dot cl. So cl is just a ceiling function, and if you check the documentation, it says that it will round it up to the next integer. So tip amount is seal of tip amount. Now this gives us an error because tip amount here is a val. It is constant, so we need to change it to a var. Right. I think that's good. And now we just need to add an on-click listener. So the button ID was calculate button, right? So calculate button dot set on click listener. And we can actually just move all of this in here, because as I mentioned, we are not actually declaring the image view again and again, or I mean, in Ritik's case, the image view. In our case, the edit text, the radio group, whatnot. We are accessing it through the binding variable, so there is no cost to actually doing this. Um, and that's it. So when the button is clicked, we calculate the amount, and then we set the text to this final text view, which I forgot to give an ID to. So let's give it tip amount text. So binding dot tip amount text, the text equals, and we're just going to use a bit of string interpolation here, if you remember the first session. So tip amount colon and a dollar sign for interpolation with the tip amount. I think that looks good. We can go ahead and see if this app actually works. So I'm going to run the app, and it's going to show me that the app is actually running. हेलो, सुनाई दे रहा है क्या? हेलो हेलो हेलो, कब से म्यूटेड था? Right, I hope you guys can hear me again. Right, okay. So I'll just explain this part again. We're just going to do a bit of string interpolation here by using the binding, and we just set it to the tip amount. And what this part is doing is basically we're checking if this switch, this thing, is set to true or false. And if it is checked, then we round up the tip amount to the next integer. So using the kotlin.math.cl function, we're just rounding it off to the next integer. And that's it. If you have any questions, please ask about what we have done so far. You would like to super chat? Sure, check out my GitHub. You can sponsor me there. Right. Moving on from super chats. I mean, thank you for the tip, because we are ironically building a tip calculator. So let's just see how it goes. Anyway, now that the app is actually running, let's go ahead and test it out. So let's say the cost of service was 50, and the service was good. It was pretty good. And we don't really want to round up the tip. We're not that rich. So let's just calculate. And that gives us a tip amount of 9. But what is this 9 actually? What is it? Is it dollars, rupees? What is it? And it's not showing our currency amount, right? Which is bad user experience yet again. So for this, again, um, Kotlin or Java actually provides convenient functions to figure out the local currency and display it. So for that, we're going to be using a number format class. And let's just do it. Tip amount equals number format. And in this auto select, you please remember to select the one that says java.text, not the android.ico.text. So java.text is the one you want to use. So number format dot get currency instance, because we are dealing with currency, of course, and then just dot format or tip amount. And if this returns an error, that's because it's not a string. Um, let's just assign it to a new variable. Let's call it formatted tip. Right. So a formatted tip is a string which is formatted using a currency, the local currency, and then we, instead of setting tip amount directly, we use the formatted tip amount, and we rebuild and rerun our app. And that's it. That's our app again. So let's try again. Calculate. And that actually gave us an error. So when you get errors like this, you want to check the logs. The logs tell you everything. And to access the logs, there's a window at the bottom which is logcat. You want to go over there and see what's actually happening. So rerun this, and we'll see what the error actually was. Yeah, the cost of service was 55, let's say, or 23. And this time let's round a bit there. Calculate and see what happens. Right. So it says you cannot format the given object as a number, which is strange. And of course, that's because we're doing a toString. So we can use the tip amount directly and use formatted tip, and that's how you solve errors. I mean, you will have to face errors as developers. That's it. So it says $11, and the reason it's in dollars and not rupees right now is because this emulator is set to the US locale, so it thinks it's actually in the US. But if you do it yourself, it'll get you the local currency. Okay, so that's pretty cool for a first attempt, but we still have some problems here. Like, what happens if we try and enter some text instead of numbers here? And then we click on calculate. As we expected, it's going to crash because it says number format exception for input string, blah, 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 right? So the way we can actually fix this is using a different function than .to double. So what we are going to be using is .to double or null. So what this will actually do is, if it's unable to parse, um, then it will return a null, and we want to be able to check for that null. So what we're going to be doing is, if input amount equals null, then we just return this function. We don't need to do anything with it, we just return. And that's not all that we want to do, but we'll get to the remaining part later. Right, cost of service, let's make it some text and calculate. And as you can see, it doesn't crash. So that's one error handled, but there's still some more stuff that you might want to handle in this scenario. So what if you type some numbers, calculate it, you got the tip amount, and then you put some text again and you calculate it again. Still going to say tip amount $87, which is, as expected, bad user experience. So to fix this, in this if condition, what we can actually do is set binding dot tip amount text dot text to blank, then rerun, so that anytime the input amount is null, it will set it to blank. And we can see if this works by putting some number first. Excuse me. Calculate, and then enter some text. Calculate again, and it will hide it. So that's two cases handled. But wouldn't it be even better if the user didn't even have an option to actually type text in this place? And with Android, we can do that. So let's head over to our input text, sorry, edit text, and close the emulator for now. And here we can actually set the input type. Now the input type here that we're going to be using is number decimal, because that's how you enter numbers, decimal numbers, because of course it is price, it's an amount. And now that we've said that, let's go ahead and start up the emulator again. And if you see here, we no longer have options to enter um, strings. We can only enter numbers, decimal numbers. Then we can calculate, and it gives us the tip amount that is required. So this is our functionality complete, and it looks great. So if you have any questions, please ask me. And after that, we'll move on to a bit of theming and how to change our app's icon. How do you round down? You can use kotlin.math.floor. I think that's pretty common across most programming languages. You have two functions called ceil and floor. Pretty common. Right. Next, let's move on to some theming. We want to theme our app. We want it to look cool. We want it to have a nice color, all that stuff, like customize that app, give it your own flavor. So for that, we are going to be editing something, not in the code anymore, not in the layout anymore, but in a directory called res. So what res directory contains is your resources, as you might have expected. And there you want to go into values and go over to themes. Now you can see you have two files here, themes.xml and themes.xml-night. If you're using the latest version of Android Studio, it will create both of these for you directly. But even not, and if you want to create the night one yourself, you can do right click, new, values resource file. You can call it themes, and then inside directory name, you want to change it to values-night instead of directly values. That's how you get themes.xml, the night version. Now this night version is actually for dark mode. I mean, what sort of app doesn't have dark mode? It must be a terrible app, right? You want all your apps to have dark mode. It looks cool. It's amazing. It means you're a pro developer. So that's what our themes.xml night is for. And over there, when you go over there, you can see that we have defined some attributes which control the colors that our app is going to have. The ones that you want to watch out for are the primary color and the color secondary. So the color primary is basically what we see in our app at the top of the screen. Our buttons color is all that stuff, right? You see this purple over here. You see the button is purple. That's our primary color, but that's the default basic bitch color. We don't want that. Let's just change it up a bit. So if you look here, we have some color purple 500 things. Let's figure out where they're actually coming from. There's a file called colors.xml In here you can define variables to hold your colors, and you can change them as much as you want to. So let's leave the purple stuff as it is. Let's go ahead and add in a new color of ours. Let's call it olive green. Now, guys, my sense of color isn't great, so don't blame me if it isn't actually olive green, but let's go ahead and see how we can actually um, build this color. So our guys out there will post a link in the chat, which is a material theme designer. You guys can go ahead and check it out and build your own material color theme with that if you want. Me myself, I'm just going to go ahead and use a handy little plugin I have to see the color. That's it. And this is the color that we're going to be using. And see, if you see here, there's like your status bar is one purple, but the um, app bar is a lighter shade of purple. I don't like that. I want all of them to be the same color. I want uniformity. I have OCD in such things. So instead of using two different purples for color primary and color primary variant, let's just change both of them to olive green and olive green. And let's try and run our app. And there you have it. Our app is now olive green. And that's how you actually change your theme. But if you remember, I mentioned night themes.xml, which means dark mode. And typically, how you activate dark mode is you just put it in battery saver mode, right? So I'm going to do that. And if we come back here, we see that this is still purple. What happened? We put olive green, but it's still purple. I think that themes.xml in night has something to do with it. So let's go and check it out. All right, I see here that we have purple 200 and purple 700, both of them as well. So what you need to do is you need to change both of these here as well. But I'm actually not going to do that. Um, I'm just going to, not just going to do that. We're going to do something else as well. So olive green, and run again. Right, but I still don't like this whole green thing at the top when it's in dark mode. I mean, it's fine, it looks good when it's in light mode, but not when it's dark. So for that, you can change this color on primary to be um, something like black. Oops, sorry. You need to change the status bar color. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, you don't need it to be the color primary variant. Just set it to color on primary. Start the app, and you'll see it has changed to a nice little black. If you don't think that matches, you can try and play around with different colors. You can try saying color surface, stuff like that. Make it look uniform, all kinds of things. Yeah, I think that looks better, right? It's very nice and uniform, a dark look. Right. But for this session, just for the sake of visibility, let's get back to light mode. Right. And this is our app. And that's how you create an app, customize the theme, and add a dark mode, and customize the dark mode as well. If you have any questions about this part, please ask me. And in the next one, we'll be moving on to changing the icon, after which will be the end of the session. Can you change the buttons color? Yes, you can. You can go over here into your layout, activity main, and inside your button, you can do something like let's minimize the emulator, background tint, and set it to whatever color you want. You can make it black. The black strip down there, what do you mean? Do you mean the navigation buttons, the back button, the forward button? I think you mean the navigation bar, right? For that, you have an item called nav bar color, navigation bar color, and here you can set it to whatever you want. So typically, I like to set it to transparent so it matches the rest of the theme. So Android colors slash whoops transparent, and if that doesn't work, you can just always do hashtag 0000000, right? 8 zeros. That's a transparent color. Oops, expected color but got a raw string. Of course, I keep forgetting. You should use a color from here. Right. You have 100% alpha, which means it is transparent. So you can now do color transparent. Just run it. Hmm, that's strange. Maybe transparent isn't acceptable anymore. Let's just set it to white then. That works. Yes, the two first ones control the opacity. That's the alpha channel. So it is A, R, G, B. A for alpha, R for red, G for green, and B for blue. Right. Anyway, apart from that, let's move on to changing the icon. So for the very first thing, you need to have an icon before actually changing the icon. So let's go ahead and add a drawable here. A drawable is basically a vector. You can use a PNG or a JPG if you really want to, but I'm just going to use a nice little drawable that Android Studio has directly. So new vector asset, and I'm just going to use it's a tips app, right? So let's use a dollar icon, right? And let's just call it IC dollar. Next and finish. So now we have a dollar icon here, which we are going to be using for our app icon. And the way that you set an app icon is you go to drawable, you right click on it, say new image asset, not a vector asset, an image asset. And here you see all of the basic icons, the default icons that come with Android Studio. You're going to see them all here. And it's going to show you the icons in different configurations. Like if you're on Samsung, you'll have a squircle. If you're on an MI phone, you'll have a square. If you're on a Google Pixel, you'll have a circle, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and change it. Our foreground layer. So we have two layers. We have a foreground and we have a background. So our foreground layer is going to be select from here. Um, let's go to Android Studio projects and let's just select the file that we just created. Um, it's going to be called tips app, tips calculator, I'm sorry, app, src, main, res, drawable, and IC dollar, right? So let's go ahead and open that. But I think that's a bit too big. So let's just trim it. Yeah, that trimmed it down to the actual size. And let's maybe reduce the size a bit to make it look nice. Right. I think that fits perfectly. I think that looks great. Right. So now let's go ahead and change the background. Let's make the background a color, the same color that we used for um, our, right. This is the color that we used for our primary. So let's go ahead and change that. Select the hex and paste in the hex that you want. And don't worry if it looks bad here, it will look great inside the launcher. So next, it's going to tell you that it's going to replace a whole bunch of files, and that's okay because there's the old launcher you're actually old launcher icon you're actually replacing, the default one. So go ahead and finish. Then you want to go ahead and run it on your emulator, and we can see how it looks. And if you go ahead and see here, this is the app that we created right now, and this is the icon that we made. I think like it looks pretty cool, right? Yeah, that's how you change an icon on in an Android app. Uh, that brings us to the end of our session. If you have any questions, drop them. We have a QA round right now. We are taking any questions, including personal but not safe for work ones. So go ahead. How did I start my journey in Android dev? So when I first came to VIT, I didn't really know much. I was um, I was not even a CS student. I am not a CS student. When I first came, I just had very basic knowledge of C++ basically, and that's not helpful in Android development, of course. So when I first went to hackathon, I felt really bad. Like I can't really do anything here, and all these other guys, they're so good. So there, I decided everyone's making an app. I'm going to make an app. I'm going to become an Android developer. So that's how I decided to learn Android. I learned Java on my own. I learned Android on my own, and from there, my journey continued. And no, Android is not all I want to do. It is just one of the things I want to do. I'm a full stack developer. I like building backends. I like building websites. I like building desktop apps, all sorts of cool stuff. I also do a bit of amateur design, and I do a bit of 3D modeling as well. So I have quite a lot of interests. How did I join DSC? Um, so in my first year, I was pretty nervous. I thought I didn't have enough knowledge to actually join DSC. So in my second year, just for the fun of it, I thought why not? Let me just apply. Let's see what happens. And so I went to the Android round because that was the stuff that at that time I found the easiest. I answered it, and the interview went pretty well, and that's how I basically got into a DSC. And how it actually helped me is I met seniors there who helped me make learn best practices for building Android apps, and that really helps you in getting a footing and actually getting a job. That's what I feel. Hmm. Thanks. You're interesting too. Anyone else have any questions?
Hey Amog, it was an amazing session. I
Right.
think uh, we're done with the app, right?
Yeah, we're done with the app.
Yes. So I hope it was a really fast-paced session, and I hope everyone learned a lot. Um, so this is the end of our session two. But as we mentioned earlier, that we have some exciting announcement for you. So that was that we're going to have an competition among our study group. So all of you will have to, I mean, all of you can submit a Android app to us before 22nd January, and we will be selecting the top one app, which will be being forwarded to like the Google's team. And if they like it, I mean, if it wins out of all the other Android study groups, you will get a chance to be featured on Google's social media. Basically, your app will be featured on Google's own social media. And I mean, basically, you'll be competing with all the other Android study groups, which will be held by other DSCs across the world. So all of you can submit an app to us, and we'll be selecting the top winner of that competition, and we'll be sending it to Google, right? And also, maybe internally we can have top three winners. So we'll be awarding some swags or something for the top three winners. And more details will be out soon on the Telegram group. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you're enjoying your Android journey till now.
About reaching out to us, please ask us any questions you have on the public group. I personally have a lot of contacts on Telegram, and I really can't keep track of everything. I'm in over 100 groups, so personal messages get lost very easily. So tag me in the group. That's much easier, and it also helps the other people out there to have their doubts solved. And same goes for everyone else. Please feel free to ask your questions in the group, and we'll do our best to help you out.
I guess we'll wait for 2 minutes. If you have any more questions, you can ask. Maybe related to like my session, if you missed out on some things, or
Yes, our Discord is open as well. Although I'm not as active on Discord, so just ask someone else if I don't respond.
yeah. So we have put the link of a Telegram group in the banner. So if you haven't joined it yet, you can go ahead and use that link to get into our Telegram group. This is specifically the Android Study Jams group.
Ritik, I
So in
think we
the
have one last
next
question and
session,
we can move on. Yeah.
yeah. So in the next session, we'll be dealing with list views and specifically the recycler view in Android, which is quite interesting as you'll be using it in most of your apps. I mean, it's pretty common to use a recycler view, and we might have some more stuff for you planned. So stay tuned, and we'll let you know soon when our next session will happen.
Right. So thank you all for attending our session. We hope you learned quite a bit in the session. And if you missed our last session, please go and check it out. It's necessary for all the concepts that we introduced in this one. Feel free to watch this video again. It's being uploaded to YouTube even after the stream ends. Feel free to watch it if you missed something. And we hope you had a great time. We had a great time sharing our knowledge with you guys. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks a lot, guys, for attending this session.